Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Power Parsha Pearls. We are currently in the 9 days, the saddest period of the time of the Jewish calendar, leading into the 9th of Av. And it is during this time that we reflect on the trials and tribulations that we've been enduring all through this exile state, ever since that fateful day a little over 2,000 years ago when the temples were destroyed. These days focus our mind and our attention to the desperate yearning of being able to have peace and tranquility reign supreme throughout the world once more. Do you know, on the night of the 9th of Av, we read the Book of Lamentations. And the Book of Lamentations, otherwise known as Eicha, begins with the words, Eicha, alas, how is it that Jerusalem is sitting in isolation? Comes along the Medrash and tells us that there were 3 people in Jewish history who prophesied using that very word, Eicha. Literally, it translates to mean how, but more appropriately, again, it is an expression of lamentation, meaning alas. All 3 who used that word in their prophecies spoke to the Jewish people, to their beloved people, using the word Eicha, alas. How can it be? The Medrash continues. Moses declared, in using that word, in the Torah portion that we will be reading this Shabbat, saying, Eicha esalavadi, alas, how has it come to be that I carry alone your load, your burdens, and your quarrels? Isaiah, many generations later, the prophet declares, Eicha, alas, how does it come to pass that a faithful city such as Jerusalem becomes unfaithful like a harlot? Righteousness was commonplace there, and now there are murderers. Isaiah, to be sure, lived 1 generation before the destruction of the first temple, and he already observed the horrific downfall of his people. And he cannot comprehend how a city like Jerusalem that embodied righteousness and justice, where sacredness abounded throughout, was now a haven for killers. That was the primary sin, including idolatry prior to the destruction of the first temple. And then thereafter, Jeremiah the prophet declared, as indeed we read on the night of Tisha B'Av, on the night of the 9th of Av, Eicha Yashva Badad. Alas, how is it come to pass that this holy city, which pulsated with life and people, now sits in solitude like a lonely widow, isolated and alone? Jeremiah came after Isaiah. He now sees Jerusalem already consumed in the Babylonian flames of Nebuchadnezzar, in destruction, and he could not rest, and he couldn't find comfort when observing such destruction. Now, inasmuch as all 3 prophets, Moses, Isaiah, and Jeremiah, used that same word, Eicha, alas, how does it come to pass? Why does the Medrash string them together? What is the thematic connection between these 3? They lived at different intervals. They underwent different experiences. Yes, they all used that same expression of lamentation, Eicha, but the fact that the Medrash chooses to bring them all together, 3 prophesied using that word, suggests that there is some underlying connection. And it is this. The Medrash is demonstrating what you might call an evolution of consciousness. That is to say, there's a natural domino effect leading from the initial experience of Moses, as he expresses in his lament, to the later lament of Isaiah and the ultimate reflections of Jeremiah. There's an inevitable progression from Moshe's Eicha to Jeremiah's Eicha, and thus they all use the same term. So by mentioning them together, the Medrash is forewarning, if you ignore the message encapsulated in the Eicha, in the lament of Moses, then you will endure the turmoil as contained within the Eicha, the lament of Isaiah, which in turn will lead to the suffering as summed up in the Eicha and the lament of Jeremiah. Lest you put a stop to one, you'll end up with the other and then the other. So let's understand. What exactly did Moses mean in his expression of lamentation? Was he merely protesting the burden and the difficult task? Alas, how has it come to pass that I have to carry you? Is it just that he's lamenting the task and the tiredness of having to lead the people? Surely then he would have expressed himself in different terms, not harsh terms of lamentation. But the point is, he was lamenting something else. The emphasis is not, alas, how has it come to pass that I have to lead, but that I have to lead you alone. Why am I carrying you alone? Why, oh, why am I the only one who cares? Why am I the only one who has to carry you, who's looking to carry you, who can't fall asleep at night knowing that some member of my people is hurting? Why am I carrying you alone? I'm the only one perturbed, restless, knowing the particular agony of any one person from amongst my people. Why am I carrying you alone, the only one who cannot sit down to a meal to enjoy, knowing that there are pains and sufferings endured by others who cannot enjoy? We all have our own constituency, our circle of friends, our families, our loved ones, people whom we care about more passionately and more intimately. And Moshe wants to know why no one seems to care for those beyond their comfort zones. Why is it only Levadi, I alone, who has made all of the Jewish people my constituency? At the end of the day, says Moshe, alas, when everyone turns out the light, why am I the only one who still cannot sleep? Says the Medrash, when we experience such a state of existence, that then sets into motion a steady decline and moral downfall. If everybody remains passive, apathetic, indifferent to the plight of others, if we cave to that cardinal sin of individualism, I'm into it for myself, then, as per the prophecy of Isaiah, we regress into a state of frivolousness, essentially unfaithfulness towards one another. And that in turn leads, as per the prophecy of Jeremiah, to destruction and ultimate isolation. You know, there are scholars and there are pious people and maybe even miracle workers. There may be those who will wave banners and issue forth protests and write letters and sign checks. But if you don't really care at the core, and it is only Levadi, me alone, if you start off only in pursuit of your own agenda, then don't be surprised that somewhere down the line you end up all on your own. In the words of Jeremiah, in total isolation like that of a widow. When we care about another, when we reach out to another, when we extend beyond our comfort zones, when we are willing to sacrifice for the sake of another, when we are not just living alone, minding our own business, then we bypass the visions of Isaiah and we can avoid the prophecy of Jeremiah. Here's a fun fact, or maybe it's not such a fun fact, but you know, halacha prescribes for us how we are meant to conduct ourselves during the 9 days. How we're supposed to actually behave, particularly on the 9th of Av itself. And halacha actually says that one of the things that we do to demonstrate our state of mourning is that we don't greet one another. A mourner typically, God forbid, in the week of Shiva, doesn't greet people. People come over and say hello, and you can respond, etc. But in the first instance, certainly during the first few days, you don't greet anybody because you're in a state of grief. So you don't say good morning. And on the 9th of Av, in the morning, you don't say good morning. You just don't greet. You don't say hello. That's how you demonstrate your sense of grief on the 9th of Av, your sense of mourning. That's how you feel the enormity of the day. I got a question. What if you're that kind of person who never stops to smile to say hello to anybody anyway? What if you're the kind of person who's never saying good morning to anybody anyway? So there's no difference in your conduct. There's no demonstration of mourning or grief. So the challenge is to utilize the next several days leading into the 9th of Av to say hello, to greet everybody, even those you may not be inclined to say hello to. And then when the 9th of Av comes along, you'll have that sense and that feeling that Moshe had, and you'll be inclined to redress the balance. Now, here's the thing about the 9th of Av. When the Talmud wants to focus our attention as to the events that led to the destruction of the Second Temple, it shares with us the story of a Jewish man by the name of Bar Kamsa, who was thrown out of a prominent feast in Jerusalem in the presence of many rabbis who didn't protest, and his shame caused him to go to Caesar in Rome and declare, "The Jews have rebelled against you." Caesar demanded proof, so Bar Kamsa said, "Send them an offering to sacrifice on their altar in the temple and see if they're going to be willing to sacrifice it." Caesar agrees. He sends a choice calf with his Jew, requesting that it be offered on the altar in the temple. Bar Kamsa went ahead on the way, blemished the animal, rendering it unfit for sacrifice in the temple. Not much of the story a lot of people know, but the Talmud describes the dilemma that then ensued. The rabbis considered, let's bring the animal anyway. We have to maintain peace with Caesar. After all, rejecting Caesar's offering could result in dire consequences. Peace with Rome must override all other considerations. One respected sage, Rabbi Zechariah, argued against this. He said, it's going to set a bad precedent. People are going to misinterpret this. People will say that blemished animals are suitable to be offered on the altar. So they said, okay, in that case, let's get rid of Bar Kamsa. In so doing, he can't go back to report to Rome that the offering was rejected. Again, Rabbi Zachariah argued against it. That's a dangerous precedent. People misinterpret this and say, if somebody blemishes a sacrifice, they're deserving of the death penalty. So what do? Nothing. The offering wasn't sacrificed, and that triggered the ire of Caesar. And ultimately, the Roman war built up against the Jews, and it ensued with full force. After a long siege, Vespasian burnt the temple, destroyed Jerusalem, murdered untold numbers of Jews, and exiled the survivors. Regarding this incident, the great Talmudic sage Rabbi Yochanan said, the humility of Rabbi Zechariah destroyed our home, burnt our temple, and exiled us from our land. That's harsh stuff. Is it a fair statement? Wasn't it Rome, not Rabbi Zechariah, that was responsible for the war and the destruction? Wasn't it the Jewish informer, Bar Kamsa, who stoked the flames and provoked Rome in the first place, rather than Rabbi Zechariah, who was responsible? What's Rabbi Yochanan actually saying? Here's a little anecdote. Sundar Pichai, he's now probably, about 53, 54 years old, CEO of Google. Makes a salary of about $175, $180 million a year. At one of his presentations, he told of the following incident, which he observed. At a restaurant, a cockroach suddenly flew from somewhere and sat on a lady. And she's sitting with a few friends, and she starts to scream out of fear. And with a panic-stricken and trembling voice, she started to jump, her hands desperately trying to get rid of the cockroach. Her reaction, of course, is contagious. Everybody within the group also got panicky. She finally managed to push the cockroach away, but it landed on another lady in the group. And now it's the turn of the other lady to continue the drama. A waiter observing this rushes forward to their rescue. And in the relay of throwing, the cockroach next fell upon the waiter. He stood firm. He composed himself. He observed the behavior of the cockroach on his shirt. And when he was confident enough, he grabbed it with his fingers and he threw it out of the restaurant. And Sundar, Google CEO, said, sipping my coffee and watching the amusement, the antenna of my mind picked up a few thoughts and started to wonder, was the cockroach responsible for the dramatic behavior? If so, why was the waiter not panicking? He handled it to near perfection without any chaos. How? And then I realized it's not the cockroach, but the inability of the patrons to handle the annoyance caused by the cockroach that disturbed them so deeply. And then he continued, reflecting on his own life. I realized that it's not the yelling of my father or my boss or my spouse that disturbs me. It's my inability to handle the disturbances caused by their yelling that disturbs me. It's not the traffic jams on the road that disturbs me, but my inability to handle the disturbances caused by the traffic jam that disturbs me. More than the problem, it's my reaction to the problem that creates chaos in my life. I understood, he said, I should not react in life. I should respond. The women reacted to the cockroach. The waiter responded. You see, reactions are always instinctive, but responses are well thought out in order to save a situation from getting out of hand, to avoid taking decisions in anger or anxiety or stress or hurry. That's the message that Rabbi Yochanan was conveying when he condemned Rabbi Zechariah. In life, you have to make decisions. Sometimes in moments of crisis, we like to remain passive, as Rabbi Zechariah did, hoping maybe the problem will somehow go away on its own. Life doesn't work that way. You have to decide on a path and pursue it with confidence and courage. Perhaps worse than making the wrong decision is not making a decision at all and just letting things happen on their own. Rabbi Zechariah was a noble man. In order not to ever do anything wrong, he played it safe. He was sensitive to setting wrong precedents. He wanted to be morally perfect and avoided tough decisions that always involved risk of error and moral failure. So Rabbi Yochanan expressed it bluntly when he put the onus of destruction on Rabbi Zechariah. Modesty, tolerance, the art of compromise, they are profoundly noble attributes. But if there's a crisis lurking, they can be lethal. When you have an informer who's going to go to Rome and testify against the Jews, endangering the lives of millions, you've got to break the law. That is the Jewish law that says, no, you are, or the precedent you're worried about. And either sacrifice the blemished animal or get rid of the informer. In real life, you can't always afford to sit on the fence. As painful as it may be, you have to take a decisive stand and make tough decisions. Said Rabbi Yochanan, the humility of Rabbi Zechariah destroyed our home, burnt our temple, and exiled us from our land. In his humility and in his nobility, he wanted to play and pacify all sides. Not because he was insincere, but because he was afraid of making the wrong decision. But that was wrong. You need to learn how to make decisions in life and go with them. Will we make mistakes? Of course. One day you might even regret the decisions you made, but your regret will be deeper for decisions that you didn't make just to play it safe. Sometimes the decision is imperfect, but the alternative, I suggest to you sometimes, is far more imperfect. Let me leave you with this final thought regarding the 9th of Av. In Rome, for those who will have seen, there is, of course, the Arch of Titus. When the Roman general Titus returned to Rome after his astounding victory, his triumph was memorialized by the building of that special arch in which they engraved the image of Jewish slaves carrying the menorah and other articles taken from the temple in Jerusalem. Till today, you can see the arch standing there in Rome. Think about this. If you were standing there while the arch was being constructed, what would you be thinking regarding the future of Rome versus the future of the Jewish people? Josephus was living there at the time, and he wrote in pithy graphic terms exactly what had transpired. In the end, he sums it up like this. He says, Jewish life in all of its manifestations has come to a brutal end. No nation, no homeland, no political independence, no government, no future. It was the beginning of the longest exile Israel has ever known. Rome, on the other hand, dominated the world militarily and culturally. All roads lead to Rome. Well, let's fast forward 2 millennia. Where is Vespasian? Where's Titus? Where's Caesar? Where's the Colosseum? Where are the gladiators? Where's the Roman Empire? They exist in Wikipedia and history books. But where's the menorah engraved on the Arch of Titus? Where are the Jewish slaves carrying that menorah from Jerusalem to Rome? Every Hanukkah, millions of those menorahs are kindled all over the world in the homes of millions upon millions of Jews. Do you know it was tradition in the Roman Jewish community that Jews would never walk under that arch since it was built as a demonstration of Jewish defeat? But on the night of May 14th, 1948, when Israel was declared a state, the Jews of Rome had a triumphant parade marching under the arch. Their message was clear. Rome is gone. We're still here. And you know why? Because along the way, we made decisions. Not easy ones, not comfortable ones, but always ones that were and continue to be integral to our survival as a people, defending our faith, defending our homeland, preserving our heritage. And that inspires us every bit today as well, knowing that regardless of whatever surrounds us, we will always prevail. Yes, sometimes it involves making tough decisions to be able to chart a course, but as long as we're committed to doing so, and we do that, God does the rest. Let us indeed pray that these days be turned from sadness to joy, and that there is ultimately only goodness throughout the world for one and for all.